Now let us define hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity is the term coined for adverse immune reaction. We know that immune reaction or immunity develops in a person, and the immune system responds to the antigens. Antibodies will be secreted, plus the cell-mediated immune response will be initiated, like T8 cells and CD8 cells or NK cell response will be initiated. But when there is overwhelming immune response, means the immune response is too much in excess for a particular antigen, it will result in adverse reaction. And among the adverse reaction, hypersensitivity is one type of adverse reaction. And it would happen with different kinds of antigens, and that adverse reaction will cause a lot of damage in the body. Sometimes it may lead to death also. It may even cause cardiac arrest. It may even cause kidney failure. And sometimes hemorrhagic, internal hemorrhage, and that will result in death of the individual, internal bleeding. So, according to the hypersensitivity based on types of reactions that take place in the body against the antigen, and plus the types of antibodies that are involved, it is classified into 5 different types. And the 5 different types are as follows. Type 1 hypersensitivity, which is called as anaphylactic or anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis is in terms of Latin word against, that is something against the body. And the anaphylactic reaction is majorly brought about by, or type 1 hypersensitivity is majorly brought about by IgE antibody. And I had mentioned that this antibody is also called as reagenic antibody, which causes different types of allergies. And it is also called as type 1 allergy. And what is that atopic hypersensitivity or atopic? Atopic or atopic, both ways it can be pronounced, which is nothing but the hypersensitivity which shows hereditary response, means it is passed on from one generation to another generation. And atopic hypersensitivity is in fact sometimes is present in some families, and it may be like asthma. Asthma comes under type 1 hypersensitivity. And sometimes some people suffer from dermatitis, skin rashes, which is also atopic. But it may always. But if it is running in the family, that in a given family, large number of people of the descendants of that family will be suffering from one particular type of allergy or hypersensitivity, which is called as atopic hypersensitivity. It could be even eczema. Eczema is another type of type 1 hypersensitivity. And I have already mentioned here in the slide that it is called as immediate type of hypersensitivity. Means on contact with the allergen, allergen is nothing but an antigen. And that antigen is stimulating this hypersensitivity or type 1 hypersensitivity. And it will happen within 20 to 30 minutes of contact with the allergen. Immediate. And the reaction can be so adverse and violent. Anaphylactic shock will be so bad sometimes. If not taken care, the person may die. It could be the respiratory distress, the constriction of the bronchial passage, and choking to death. Or it could be cardiac arrest. or it could be hemorrhage within the body. So if it is not controlled, sometimes it is very, very dangerous. And people who suffer from anaphylactic shocks or anaphylactic reactions on contact with allergens, they should avoid those allergens or antigens. But just in case if they come in contact with the antigen by accident, it is better to keep always a first aid with them to save them from the detrimental effect. Let us move on to the second type. I'll be dealing with each type in detail in the later part of this lecture. But now I would like to introduce the different types of hypersensitivity. Type 2 hypersensitivity. And this type 2 hypersensitivity is generally or majorly caused by antibody dependent cytotoxicity, where IgG or IgM are majorly involved. IgG or IgM are majorly involved. And here, the antigens that are bound to the cell membrane will be responsible for triggering this reaction. The antibody directed against the cellular antigens, that is, the antigens that are bound to the plasma membrane, will be reacted upon by these antibodies. Either it is IgG or it is IgM, and the reaction may take place within 5 to 8 hours of contact of the antigen with the antibody, and the cell lysis will take place. The antibody dependent cytotoxicity, I've already explained to you, it is called as ADCC response, where the cells like the macrophage, NK cells, eosinophils, then the other cells which are important, they will be causing the antibody bridge with the cell which is having the antigen and result in lysis of that cell. Okay, and it is also very dangerous. That is why when a graft is done, the tissue graft, say for example, transplantation, the transplantation will result in transfer of an organ from one individual to the another individual. And the donor's organ will have cellular antigens, which are different from the antigens of the host. The host body will recognize those antigens and mount an immune response against those antigens. And the organ which is grafted is going to be damaged or lysed completely. And this is type 2 hypersensitivity. Then comes type 3 hypersensitivity, immune complex mediated hypersensitivity, which is also called as precipitin allergy. The name itself tells you that here the antigen that is involved is soluble and the antibody is also soluble, and majorly the antibody involved here is IgG antibody. And this reaction also takes place within 2 to 8 hours of contact with the and the antigen here will be in the soluble form. And remember, I had mentioned the example of the antivenom of the snake and the antivenom that is produced in the horse. And that antivenom will have horse antibodies. And horse antibodies are foreign to human being. And they are not the same antibodies like human antibodies. Of course, they may be IgG antibodies. Moment the horse antibody is given as an antivenom treatment to the human being, that human being will recognize that horse antibody and mount an immune response against it. And that is called as precipitin allergy. And the reaction is so adverse that if it is not controlled, it would cause severe kidney damage. Okay. Then come to type 4 hypersensitivity. The type 4 hypersensitivity is delayed type. Delayed means it will happen after 72 hours. It may take 3 days for the expression, but when it expresses after 3 days, it is going to be violent. It is going to be painful. It is going to be problematic. And it is mediated by cells. It is therefore called as cell mediated. Here, majorly, the antigen presenting cells will be involved, which will be presenting the antigens to the Th cells, and the Th cells will get triggered, and it is the Th1 response, and had given that example, which is called as delayed type hypersensitivity, which is called a DTH response caused by Th1 T cells. And details we'll see later when we move ahead with this lecture. Then type 5 hypersensitivity, which is also called as autoimmune response. And it is autoimmune hypersensitivity where body of an individual recognizes the self antigen as a foreign antigen and mounts an autoimmune response against that self antigen, resulting in an adverse reaction. And therefore, it is called as stimulatory hypersensitivity. Details of that we'll see later. Okay, now we will take first the type 1 hypersensitivity. The type 1 hypersensitivity is caused by following allergens or the antigens. The proteins could be the vaccines that are administered, or the proteins could be foreign serum, which is nothing but the antivenom, or the proteins could be of the bacterial origin or viral origin. Sometimes, when there is severe infection by a particular species of a bacteria or a particular virus, some people develop severe rashes on the body. There'll be itchy rash on the body. The body will also swell. There'll be joint swelling, pain in the joint, and eyelids will be swollen, cheeks will be swollen. Okay, the person looks almost bloated. The reason being that foreign protein of bacterial or viral origin, or the foreign protein that is administered as a vaccine or as an antivenom, would cause this reaction, immediate reaction. Okay, then the proteins could be of food origin. They may be present in the food. Like there are people allergic to nuts. Some are allergic to hazelnut. Some are allergic to Brazilian nut. Some are allergic to the groundnuts. Okay, so the nuts, which are nothing but the seeds, and they will contain different types of proteins. And on eating that nut, the person may develop allergic reaction. There are people allergic to seafood. If they eat prawn, they will get rash on the skin. Or if they eat prawn, they start vomiting. Immediately, the vomiting will start. The vomiting is because of the gastrointestinal allergy. If they start showing itchiness on the skin and the skin becomes too itchy, and allergy is expressed on the skin, which is called as cutaneous allergy. The target organs that are going to be involved with hypersensitivity type 1 will be different. A person may eat food, and after eating food, he may get asthmatic attack. The target organ is now his bronchial passage. He has eaten food, but getting asthma. The target organ is different. He is not showing gastrointestinal allergy, but showing allergy somewhere else. The reason being, the mast cells in that area are triggered and they are causing the problem. So it need not be that wherever you come in contact with the antigen, the allergic response should be shown there only. It could be somewhere else. Okay. And since it is somewhere else, it is called as non-target allergic response. and it could be due to various. So then coming to eggs, there are people who are sensitive to eggs, egg protein. On eating egg, they will be uncomfortable. They will not be able to tolerate. They will develop various kinds of reactions. Okay. Then certain beans and peas, and then the milk. People are allergic to milk also. Some people are allergic to milk also. They can't take milk because of the milk protein. So majorly, it is the proteins or glycoproteins which are the cause for allergic reaction. Then comes the plant derived materials. You know that in some seasons when the plants produce pollens, means flowering, the flowering seasons of the plants, especially during the month of February, March, which is the flowering season. Different species of plants will be flowering and the pollens will be shed off for the cross pollination. And these pollens will be there in the air. And the people who breathe these pollens, sometimes they develop allergic reactions. Some may develop asthma, some may develop skin rash, continuously keep having the nasal exudation, the fluid coming from the nose, they can't withhold it. And there will be watery exudation from the nose, and they will suffer from this allergy as long as these pollens are there in the atmosphere. And once these pollens disappear, the allergy also disappears. Then there are certain grasses which have fine epidermal hair, and there are some weeds. They also have thorns or spines or bristles. And by coming in contact with the grass hairs, or when these grass hairs are shed into the air, the people will develop allergic reaction. Okay. So then coming to insect products, there are people allergic to bees venom. When a single bee stings them, sorry, not biting, stings them, they will develop severe reaction. One bee sting will be sufficient. They may even have cardiac arrest. They may die also. It is very severe, genetic born, and that will be very, very severe. But there are people who can take many bee stings, nothing happens to them. They will just show swollen parts in the body where the bee sting is there, but later they recover. Wasp venom. Wasp is also another stinging insect. Ant venom, simple ant. Some ants have a sting and they sting you when you stamp on them or something like that. And that also causes severe swelling in the area the venom has been injected by the ant. The cockroach calyx. Cockroach calyx is nothing but the skin of cockroach, the scales of cockroach, or even the cockroach droppings. And the cockroach droppings will be there in the places in your house where you're not touched the place for quite some time. You're not cleaned it, or the place is having lot of number of books, and those books were not touched for a long time. And eat cellulose, they can eat even the book. And you know that in that area there will be cockroach calyx will be there. And when you're cleaning that place, if you don't cover your nose, there is a possibility that these small calyx and hairs and cockroach droppings may come in contact with you, and you may start developing allergy. And there'll be severe sneezing, nasal exudation, tears from the eyes. All this will happen because of the type 1 reaction. All these are mild reactions. They are shown to you as symptoms in the beginning as mild reaction. But if you don't take control of them, they may lead to real detrimental effect. Dust mites. Dust mites are there in each and every house because we keep shedding our skin every day in our day-to-day life, and we keep shedding our hair. Hair falls from our body, hair falls from our head, and all those hairs and the scales that are shed off the body will be accumulating in nooks and corners of our house. Even though you dust it, sweep it, swab it, some corners will have these epidermal scales. And when they are available there, the mites will be feeding on them and growing there. And once in a while, you take it seriously and start cleaning without protecting your nostril and mouth, you may suffer from severe dust mite allergy because these mites are not visible to the naked eye. They are microscopic. When they are inhaled, they will go into your nostril and they in fact get attached there in your nostril and they start biting there. And there'll be severe itching in the nose because of the bites by the mites. Bites by the mites. And you will have, because of that itching, you will start sneezing, nasal exudation will be there, and you will suffer from the allergy. Then the mold spores. Mold spores are nothing but the fungal spores. The fungus grows in the moist seasons, that is, especially rainy seasons. When the rainy seasons are warm, different species of molds will grow in different parts of our house, different places, which, in fact, if you clear that mold spores without protecting yourself, you may suffer from allergy from the mold spores. Same way, people have pets at home. They have cats, they have dogs, sometimes people rear the horses, all this. And when you groom them, when you run your hand over their body, or when you groom their hair, when you clean them, they also drop their scales, hairs from their body, which is called as dandruff or danders. Dander is nothing but dandruff. And you have seen these advertisements in the TV. The dandruff is shown for the head and shoulder, the shampoo and all those things. So the danders are nothing but the dead scales of the skin. So those dead scales of the skin, if inhaled, they cause allergy in the person. Then coming to the drugs, you know that there are people sensitive to drugs like penicillin. Even a small dose of penicillin administered, those people will show adverse reaction. Generally, when the penicillin is supposed to be administered, which is a life-saving drug, first a test dose is supposed to be administered to the person. And the test dose is generally administered in your forearm, the inside of your forearm. A small dose is administered with a pen, they will make a mark there. And they will ask you to wait for some time. And within half an hour, if you develop a red patch there in the pen marked area, red patch, that is an indication that you are sensitive to that drug, not be given in large dose. By mistake also, once you see that reaction, if the person is given the large dose of the drug, the person will die because of the cardiac arrest. The person will be, the indication on the skin development of the red patch itself is an indication that you are very, very hypersensitive for that drug. Similarly, there are drugs of sulfonamide nature, sulfa drugs. People are sensitive to sulfa drugs. Then it is also very important that whenever you are going for surgery, suppose, or somebody is going for surgery, at that time the anesthetist will administer a small dose of anesthetic to you in the beginning before you are taken to the operation table to see whether you show any adverse reaction to that anesthetic that is going to be administered to you for your operation. And if you show reaction to that anesthetic, once again here, wherever anesthetic is going to be administered a small dose, that area will be marked. And if you develop a red patch in that area, that is an indication that you are sensitive to that anesthetic. And the anesthetist should now think of alternative anesthetics. There are many alternative anesthetics available, and that anesthetic which you are showing reaction should not be administered to you. In spite of that warning, if the person is not tested, also sometimes if the person is not tested for the anesthetic and the anesthesia is given with that anesthetic, the person dies on the operation table before the surgery is done. Okay, there are certain ointments which contain salicylates. It is the salt of salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is a highly corrosive acid. Sometimes these ointments are there in the skin ointments which are used for skin rash. Okay. And these skin rash ointments, they say that it gives you immediate relief. You apply this wherever there is an itch in the skin. But on the contrary, because of you must check beforehand when the ointment is prescribed to you. If you have an itch on the skin and you are being prescribed an ointment to be applied there, when you buy that ointment, as long as that ointment is a corticosteroid, a cortisone, okay, a cortisone, then no problem. But if it contains other ingredients like salicylates, please avoid it, because the salicylates will itch the skin more. Wherever the itch is there, if you apply there, it will cause more damage to the skin because salicylate is more corrosive. You must avoid salicylate application on the skin. Please note that. Then the reaction that is shown in the hypersensitivity of type 1 reaction, how it is shown. The plasma cells which are triggered to produce the antibody after the recognition of that particular allergen, which is an antigen, they will start producing the antibodies, and the class switching mechanism will result in production of IgE antibodies which are specific to the allergen. IgE antibodies specific to the allergen or the antigen. And these IgE antibodies will not be there in circulation for a long time. As soon as they are produced by the plasma cells, they will come into the blood, and from there they will start seeking the mast cells for their attachment. And I had mentioned that mast cells are present in the endothelial lining of the blood vessels, wherever the blood vessels are. Even in the blood-brain barrier, where in the meningeal layer of the brain, where the blood capillaries end, there also the mast cells are there. And the antibody can reach up to that point of your brain, that is up to meningeal layer. Let us say the IgE antibody that is produced against an allergen, okay, which comes in circulation and goes and binds to the mast cells in the brain area, that is in the meningeal area. And they will sit side by side. They'll be attached to the Fc epsilon receptor on the mast cell, and they'll sit side by side. And after sitting side by side, they will now have contact with that antigen, and that allergen establishes the contact with those side by side sitting IgE antibodies, which is called as cross linking. And this cross linking of the antibody is a must. Why? Because IgE antibody does not have a long cytoplasmic tail. The cytoplasmic tail of IgE antibody is very small. So therefore, two antibodies sitting side by side will be essential to activate the mast cells to undergo degranulation. The degranulation process is nothing but the granules that are present in the cytoplasm of the mast cells in the vesicles. They come and fuse with the plasma membrane of the mast cells inside, and they evert out and release the pharmacological mediators. Large number of pharmacological mediators are released into the blood of the person who is showing that allergic reaction. And that cross-linking is a must, and it will happen because the antibodies, IgE antibodies, will be sitting side by side on the mast cells. And when these pharmacological mediators are released, they will have the effect on the smooth muscles, wherever the smooth muscles are, and the smooth muscles will show contraction. Smooth muscle contraction takes place, and wherever the blood vessels are, and those blood vessels will show dilation, vasodilation will take place. And the mucus glands, especially in the bronchial passage, in the lung, and in the intestinal area, will start secreting excess of mucus. Mucus secretion will be in excess. And that is why I told you that in the nasal passage, when the allergen is in contact, and the mast cells, when they release these pharmacological mediators, there'll be continuous exudation of nasal fluid, which is watery, and it will be coming out from the nasal passage continuously, and you will start even shedding tears. Your eyes will become red, and you will almost will be in tears when the allergen is in contact with you. Then the blood platelets will respond to that pharmacological mediators, and those blood platelets could show degranulation and cause other further effects, and they will have effect on the blood vessels and smooth muscles. Okay. And the nerve endings, the sensory nerve endings sometimes show tingling sensation when you suffer from allergy. As though something is crawling on your skin, you will feel that sensation. That is called a tingling sensation. When you suffer from certain cutaneous allergy, that is skin surface allergy. The tingling sensation will be on the skin surface, and that is because of the sensory nerves being sensitized by those pharmacological mediators. And eosinophils and neutrophils, of course, will be activated. Now, what are these pharmacological mediators? Are released as an end product of type 1 hypersensitivity by the mast cells. Okay, we'll see that pharmacological mediators. We will classify them into primary mediators and secondary mediators. The primary mediators are those pharmacological mediators which are already there in the mast cells. They are present in the mast cells, stored, which is already there. And they are histamine, heparin, serotonin. Serotonin is actually a neurotransmitter, which is also called as 5-hydroxytryptamine. But it is produced in the brain. And remember, serotonin is very, very important for you for your sleep. And it initiates sleep when it is produced or secreted in your brain. And this serotonin produced by the mast cells has adverse effects. Proteases are going to be secreted, that is there in the granules of the mast cells. And the primary mediators like eosinophil chemotactic factor and neutrophil chemotactic factor, both are secreted from the mast cells. So what does histamine do? Histamine and heparin, they increase the vascular permeability. That means the blood vessels become leaky and more amount of plasma will ooze out of the blood vessels, and had used this word of vasodilation and capillary permeability in inflammation. Remember, type 1 hypersensitivity will also cause inflammation in the area where the allergen is in contact or where the allergen is in abundance. Then the smooth muscle contraction takes place. Imagine the smooth muscle lining of the intestine undergoes contraction, means there will be spasm in the intestine, and the spasm, that muscular spasm in the intestine, gives you severe pain. Intestinal area will have severe pain because of the smooth muscle contraction or spasm. That could be due to the allergen of the food origin, which has caused the mast cells in the intestinal area to release those pharmacological mediators there. It could be even the smooth muscles of the bronchial passage. I said it could be target oriented or non-target oriented. In the non-target oriented, suppose after you consume the food, the person gets asthma. That means the smooth muscle lining of the tracheal passage or the bronchial passage has undergone contraction. The person is almost choking to death because he can't breathe. The entire bronchial passage will undergo constriction in such a way that that person will be gasping for breath, and you need to administer at that time the muscular dilators like corticosteroids, which will prevent the muscular contraction and the person can breathe easily. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult to save the person. Person may die of choking. Okay, choking in the sense the bronchial spasm or the contraction of the bronchial muscles. Then serotonin, which is also called as 5-hydroxytryptamine, which will cause increased vascular permeability as well as smooth muscle contraction. See how many factors are contributing to the same thing: vascular permeability and smooth muscle contraction. Okay, so the proteases that are secreted are responsible for degradation of blood vessels. Remember, I told you it can cause internal hemorrhage. Internal hemorrhage is nothing but blood vessels have been ruptured because those blood vessels are now degraded. They have been dissolved by the protease secretion in excess in that area, and that will cause flooding of the area by blood. And internal hemorrhage is very, very dangerous. It may cause death also. Then bronchial secretions. The bronchial secretion is nothing but the mucus that that is secreted in excess. And if it floods, instead of that secretion coming out from your mouth or you spitting it out or from the nasal passage, if it goes back and into the lung, the bronchial secretion goes back into the lung, and lung will get flooded, and you're almost drowned in your own mucus that is secreted by you because of the hypersensitive reaction. And the mucus will accumulate in such a large amount in the lung, you will be incapacitated. The respiratory incapacitation will take place. Find it very difficult to breathe. Why? Because more than half the quantity of lung or the lung space is occupied by the mucus. There'll be no space left for the lung to expand. It is as good as filling the water in the balloon and expecting the balloon to be blown by air. It is not possible. That is what a person experiences, means drowning in his own body fluid. It is the action that takes place because of the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction that has taken place in the bronchial region. The mucus secretion causes this, which floods the lung, and lung is incapacitated. Then the eosinophil chemotactic factor and neutrophil chemotactic factor, remember that they are responsible for the inflammation in that area. Inflammatory sites are always first visited by the neutrophils and the eosinophils. Both these are capable of undergoing degranulation and secrete their own proteases and lytic enzymes, which will cause further damage in that area. To give you some idea about the secondary mediators, those are all the primary mediators. Now, secondary mediators are produced, that is only after activation of the mast cell. Primary mediators are already there in the mast cells, which are released as soon as the mast cell is activated by the cross-linking of antigen on the IgE antibody. But secondary mediators are produced after the mast cell is activated, and they are leukotrienes. They are leukotrienes, which also cause, see, once again, increased vascular permeability, smooth muscle contraction of the lung, pulmonary smooth muscle contraction. Platelet activating factors, they cause platelet aggregation in the area, and platelet aggregation may cause blood clots. Degranulation of platelets will cause smooth muscle contraction. Prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are different types of prostaglandins are there, which are called as PGE prostaglandin. Okay, and these prostaglandins cause vasodilation, vascular permeability, increased blood vessel dimension, and more amount of blood gushing to that area. Bradykinins, increased vascular permeability and once again smooth muscle contraction. Then cytokines, and these cytokines IL-2, IL-4, IL-5, IL-6, and TNF alpha are one way or the other involved in triggering the inflammatory cells. You know that IL-4 and IL-6 involved in the B lymphocytic activation and secretion of more antibody. IL-2 is involved in T cell activation and secretion of more cytokines by the T cells, and those cytokines will be involved in inflammatory reaction, that is interferon gamma and TGF beta. Tumor necrosis factor alpha is a very important inflammatory cytokine that is secreted by the mast cells as well as the macrophages. If the mast cells are coming in contact with the antigen that is on the IgE that is bound to it, same antigen can be also encountered by the macrophage and recognized as the foreign antigen, and it can also start secreting TNF alpha. And GM-CSF is secreted by the mast cells, which will trigger the production of more number of the granulocytes and the monocytes, which is called as granulocyte monocyte colony stimulating factor. Now you know that this reaction, which is an adverse reaction, results in blown up immune response, which is actually overwhelming immune response. Further, some of the photographic pictorial presentation of type 1 hypersensitivity, I will discuss that and show it to you in my next class. Okay, thank you very much.